Welcome to Israel Update. I'm Gadi Taub in Tel Aviv, and with me, you'll probably be surprised to know, is Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute, Mr. Mike Doran in Washington. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Gadi, that's Dr. Doran.
Dr. Doran. It's also Dr. Taub. So
it's Dr. Taub. It's Dr. Doran. Get it straight.
And it's Dr. Kissinger. Okay. I want to tell you something about a controversy that's been raging in this country for quite a while. There was actually a campaign, privately financed campaign, which said bomb first, then only enter later. This is because traditionally the IDF has been responding to the unfair accusations of war crimes with saying that, with priding itself that it's the most moral army in the world. And one comedian in Israel said, of course, it's the #1 moral army in the world. It's the only one that's competing. But this has been somehow ingrained into our psyche, that some of our generals said that non-combatants on the enemy's side are just as important, their lives are just as important as our soldiers. Benny Gantz, now a minister, former chief of staff, prided himself on saying that, for me, I am willing to risk my soldiers in order to save civilian lives on the other side. And that brought on a backlash, especially after the Hamas atrocity and what is not just disregard for human lives, but outright savage sadism. So there was this campaign said, bomb them from the air until we know the tunnelers are bombed, because otherwise we'll walk into a trap. And we'll be talking today about how the ground incursion is going. And the low number of casualties, actually. But the whole thing has prompted a letter from mothers, one of which I interviewed on the radio today. And this group of mothers calling themselves Winning for the Mothers of the Combatants, of the soldiers. And what they're saying is, we, the mothers, do not authorize you, Mr. Prime Minister, to take too much care for civilian lives on the other side, if that is at the expense of the lives of our sons. Do not risk them unnecessarily. So that's it's a very moving and emotional letter, especially that we've had our share of campaigns from moms, some of which were moms against the occupation, moms against the Lebanon war, and otherwise. And we'll be talking about the question of civilian casualties. And is this just a moral issue, or for Israel also a practical issue in terms of handling public opinion in the United States and in the world at large? So what do we have on our agenda today? We'll have our usual short update on how the war is going on the ground. We'll be speaking about geopolitics, Mike, about Amos Hochstein's mission to Lebanon. Why now? What is it about? We have an interview with Liel Leibovitz, who is a senior editor at Tablet, about what is going on with American Jewry in the aftermath of the murder of Paul Kessler, a demonstrator for Israel who got murdered by a pro-Palestinian demonstrator recently. And finally, we'll talk about what is going on in academia, and not in American academia. That's a subject worth pursuing on this program too, but the strange schizophrenia of current academia in Israel, since it's the bastion of progressivism, and progressivism just received a very strong blow from Hamas. So first over, Mike, the headlines.
Okay, Gadi, I can't wait to talk about academia. Not, just for the benefit of our viewers who don't know, both you and I are, well, you're not. I am a refugee from academia.
I'm a future refugee from academia.
You're a future refugee. Okay, listen, there's not a lot in the news bulletin. Basically 4 items. Israeli Air Force jets have demolished Hezbollah sites in the north, including a weapons warehouse, rocket fire installations, and infrastructure for directing terror attacks. Prime Minister Netanyahu warned Hezbollah not to join the fighting. We will not resign ourselves to a reality in which Hezbollah or its proxy Hamas in Lebanon attack our communities and our civilians. We will continue to respond with strong firepower to any attack on us. If Hezbollah chooses to enter this war, it will be making the mistake of its life, Netanyahu said. At the same time, the second item, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been having conversations with President Joe Biden, including a telephone conversation on Monday when Biden asked Netanyahu to pause the fighting in Gaza. And that's on a lot of the headlines in Israeli newspapers today. According to a White House spokesperson, the two leaders discussed temporary pauses in the fighting for humanitarian reasons and to facilitate an exchange of hostages. We'll talk more about that later, Gadi. Gallant, third item, Gallant on the ceasefire. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said, to me, humanitarian ceasefire means first and foremost, bringing home the people who are held in Gaza by these human animals. The children like the children like 3-year-old Abigail, who lost her parents and is there in Gaza alone. That is humanitarian. There will be no humanitarian ceasefire without the return of hostages. And finally, Gadi, we've got Amos Hochstein in Lebanon. He went to Lebanon yesterday. He is a senior advisor to President Biden on global infrastructure. He is the guy who was the architect of the maritime border agreement between Lebanon and Israel, former Israeli, working closely with President Biden. What was he doing in Lebanon? We don't know. You and I are going to talk about it. Over to you, Gadi.
Yeah, so we're starting with the current situation on the ground with the war, and as has become our habit, we want to start with showing you the map, if indeed I can now find it. Yes, I can here. Yeah, this is the current situation as far as we know. Mike, please explain. I'll just say that the blue parts are the IDF forces, and the arrows are obviously where they're now making forward movement.
Okay, so put your cursor on the Shifa hospital, because that is the heart of Hamas's stronghold in Gaza City. That is where its command and control headquarters are. There's a whole network of tunnels underneath it. Of course, it's a hospital. It's actually a working hospital. Yesterday, the Israelis with the Red Cross permitted the evacuation of a couple of dozen patients in the hospital down to Egypt, but Hamas only let out 2. Hamas is using the hospital and you see there's lots of videos that come out with people who come around to the grounds of the hospital to congregate. It's using them as human shields. If Israel bombs the hospital and all of the complex of tunnels underneath it, it's going to, of course, be accused of war crimes. So the Israelis are trying to get out the message that this is their target. It's presumed that Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas, is underneath the hospital. If not him, like I say, the whole complex of the leadership. Can you keep the map up there? Let's look at. I want to make one more point here. Yeah. The Israelis have done a very good job of moving in to surround Gaza City from 3 different points simultaneously. That's a harder military operation than you might think, because if one, you can just imagine, Gadi, if one of those routes of advancement went too far too fast, then you find yourself enveloped by the enemy. So you have to move in simultaneously, coordinating it as you move along, because you want to surround the area that you need to move into. But you can see by the map that the built-up areas, these are where the really difficult fighting in the city is going to take place, are in front of the Israelis. So we are really, the key point here, Gadi, is we are at the beginning of the war. You can say this is sort of stage 2 because or stage 3, there was the bombing, the preparation of the battlefield. Stage 2, the entry of the forces. Stage 3 is actually the house-to-house fighting in the city. That is only now beginning. That is the hardest part. The two hardest parts of the fight are the fighting in the city and the stabilization afterwards. You think of what happened to the United States in Iraq, what happened to Israel in Lebanon, the actually shaping the political environment after the war so that you get a lasting political order that justifies all of the military action. That is the hardest part, and that's what's ahead of us.
And the number of casualties is surprisingly small for such a war, is it not?
The number of Israeli casualties.
Yeah.
Yes, surprisingly small.
Do we know what accounts for the relatively small number?
I think it's with the caveat that I am not the world's greatest military analyst, but I know a lot of great military analysts. One of the things is, first of all, the slow, methodical way that the Israelis have gone about this. They didn't rush in. And like I said, if you look at that map closely, you'll see that the areas, and also if you look at the videos that show the activity, you'll see that these are not really the heavily built up areas yet. That's where the real difficulty is fighting house to house, and where you have, it's actually a 4-dimensional battlefield because you have the normal 3 dimensions plus the underground war that's going to go on. And that the 4-dimensional difficulties really get hard now. So
remember, let's remind our viewers that we're talking about a whole underground city that Hamas has been building for many years, as you pointed out, Mike, with North Korean technology and expertise. And this is what they have been planning for. Hence, what I mentioned in the beginning of our talk today is that Israelis insisted on a long bombing campaign from the air in order to do as much damage to the tunnels before we risk our soldiers, because we assume that it's all booby-trapped and it's all ready and waiting exactly for such a scenario. This is also why you see not just many tanks, but also what do you call a D9? Mike, the bulldozer that's designed for demolishing houses. There's a lot of construction equipment, or rather demolition equipment, that's going on into Gaza City along with the IDF. So we'll be following this. Any further remarks?
I got a couple more things to say, but just in response to what you just said. Yeah, some of the unsung heroes here for the Israelis are going to be the engineering crews who go in to demolish all of these tunnels. They're going to play a very important role. What I wanted to say is that one of the reasons why I think there's been low casualties is that there's been a revolution in military affairs that Israel has benefited from in the last 15 years, and that's in ISR. That's the reconnaissance, surveillance and reconnaissance. The Israelis have one of the most sophisticated surveillance strike complexes. If you think about, you especially see this in the north with some of the videos that the Israelis are putting out about their contest with Hezbollah. You'll see Hezbollah small teams of 1 or 2 guys with RPGs trying to get into place on the Lebanese side of the border to shoot an anti-tank missile across the border, and the Israelis identify them and take them out. I mean, you think about, you have to have near total intelligence coverage of the battlefield to such a granular level that you can identify individuals, and you have the strike assets in place to hit them, and you have the near immediate communication between the surveillance asset and the strike asset. That's a highly complex thing to pull off.
it's called closing the target circle, in which someone has to identify the target, someone has to mark the target, someone has to bring the information to whatever striking capabilities you have, whether it's the Air Force or whether you have surface-to-surface missiles or other other means, and you have to do it instantaneously. That's something that the Israeli army has been working on since the first Lebanon war. What is it now? 40 years ago, and it used to be a very, very clumsy thing. Back in the day, you had to put your own commandos so that they can mark with a laser from a distance where you have visual contact, and then from the area to pass the information verbally, so that the pilots come into the relevant range, and the bombs were clumsier, and so that's
an advantage that the Israelis have over their adversaries, and it's a very significant advantage, of course. And you'll see, I think now, if I have the numbers correct, Hezbollah has lost over 60 fighters, and that's I believe, you have to check me on this, Gadi. I was going to check it before our
it is
broadcast.
over 60, definitely, yeah.
But I wanted to check. I think that's more than they lost in the Second Lebanon War already. Don't quote me on that. Let's check it. But it's a large number comparatively speaking. But the last point here, this advantage is mitigated by the development, by the Gaza City environment, by urban warfare, because the Hamas fighters can hide in the tunnels and they can hide in the rubble and so on. And they're harder to spot.
One more thing we need to mention before we leave the coverage of the war, and this is the exodus of Gaza. This film has been shown on various media. It was said in Israel media that Hamas is trying to suppress it. What we're seeing here is people taking advantage of the humanitarian corridor. We'll show the map in a minute. The humanitarian corridor in which the IDF declared it will let people through for a certain period during the day, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And Israeli tanks had to guard the route because Hamas was attacking the people that were trying to leave. Speaking of war crimes and morality. Let's show the map one last time, Mike, just to see exactly where the escape route is.
That's the yellow route down in the southern sector of the northern part of Gaza. No,
So this is Gaza
line.
City, and this is the line through which this is the Israeli controlled territory, and this is the corridor through the Israeli controlled territory for whoever wants to escape.
So Hamas is embarrassed by this for a couple of reasons. One, it shows very clearly that the Israeli control of territory inside the Gaza Strip. Number two, it shows that the people are not listening to Hamas. Publicly told the people to stay put, not to leave. And finally,
because it needs human shields, of course.
Because it needs human shields, but their ideology doesn't say we're using you as human shields. This is very important, because this is where it strikes at their kind of self-regard. Because they say, unlike in previous wars, we are staying put. You're not going to displace us from our land. So the pictures of Palestinian refugees leaving the Gaza stronghold of Hamas in droves is reminiscent of those pictures from the 1948 of Palestinian refugees leaving Israel for Jordan and so on. These are images for Palestinians that resonate emotionally, not unlike the images that Israelis saw on October 7th and the way that it resonated for them. It says another defeat, and of course this this whole thing began with the rhetoric that this is our great victory. This is the beginning of the liberation of all of the land from the river to the sea. Not true.
And this is why many Israelis think that in order for us to convince the Palestinians that this was a terrible mistake, is to exact a price in their terms, not just in our terms, not just in military terms, not just in terms of bombing buildings, not in terms of casualties, which in this culture of worshiping death are not the currency with which you exact a price, but land. If they lose a portion of the Gaza Strip or the whole of the Gaza Strip, then that would be a sign that this was clear defeat. And if you want to deter this enemy, some Israelis say this is how to deter them.
Yeah, I'm gonna argue with those Israelis and maybe you about that in a little bit. I have a different because these images of the defeat and so on. I don't think that they should be, and that the Israelis should define victory and defeat in terms of these images. I don't, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think they make that much difference. But for the moment, in terms of the psychological warfare, the campaign of the moment, they have some value. There's the guy we mentioned before, Abu Ali Express. He's got on his Telegram channel pictures, very dramatic pictures of these crowds leaving Gaza City southward, and he's calling it Tufan al-Aqsa. Tufan al-Aqsa is the Aqsa flood. You know, the Al-Aqsa mosque in Jerusalem. The flood is the flood toward Al-Aqsa is what Hamas is calling its operation on October 7th, and so they've turned it on its head, and they're calling it the
flood to the direction of the Naksa,
the defeat.
Okay, Mike, we are hard pressed with time, so let's move to Amos Hochstein and his mission to Lebanon. Amos Hochstein is the envoy for the Biden administration who negotiated the reprehensible agreement in which the Bennett-Lapid government gave up everything for nothing, and showed off that this was the beginning of peace with Lebanon. It wasn't. We see what that peace means, and everybody was talking about Lebanon, which the deal was, of course, brokered with Hezbollah, but the Americans are not admitting that. So, what is Hochstein doing in our neighborhood once again?
So I have a theory. It's not based on nothing, but it's not absolute fact. First of all, let's understand who Hochstein is. He's an Israeli American, but he is also very personally close to Joe Biden. He worked for Joe Biden as an aide when Joe Biden was a senator. He has Joe Biden on his speed dial. He can call the president whenever he wants. This is a specially empowered envoy. Now he is responsible for global infrastructure and energy. He's the energy guy. What is he doing in Lebanon at this particular moment? I think he's there negotiating over hostages. There is a channel. It was reported in the Lebanese press. There is a channel between the U.S. and and Iran through Hezbollah about hostages. Let's not forget there's a Qatari channel to Hamas about hostages. But 20 some odd hostages are held by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is not a proxy of Iran. It is Iran. So you have two channels simultaneously. You have the Qatari channel and the Iran channel. That's what I believe is happening. I stress this is I'm putting two and two together. I may be putting two and two together and getting seven. I don't have this. I don't have this in terms of hard fact. But that's probably what he's doing.
If you're getting this right, then this is a very ominous sign, isn't it?
Well, yes, because Iran is going to use Iran is using, explicitly using, or obviously using the negotiations over the hostages in order to get a humanitarian ceasefire. And this is what the Americans are saying. We want a humanitarian pause. Well, sorry, we're going to use a euphemism. We're going to pause the fighting so we can get a hostage exchange deal. That's what the Americans are telling the Israelis.
And this is what Israel has to resist, because if this reaches a boiling point and America tries to shut down the war before there is a clear victory in the Israeli terms, which means uprooting Hamas and completely destroying their military capabilities, or in their terms, which means loss of territory, if we now stop a ceasefire in place, would mean geopolitically a victory for Hamas. Am I exaggerating?
No, not just for Hamas, for Iran. Look at the picture, because the White House is trying very hard for you not to see the picture. Iran's resistance axis is attacking Israel from 4 or 5 different places simultaneously, from Hamas, from Hezbollah, from the Houthis, from Syria, and probably from Iraq as well. At the same time, it is also attacking the United States. There have been dozens of attacks on American bases, and dozens of American soldiers have been hurt. And the Iranians are saying explicitly, Abdullahian, the foreign minister, was in New York, and he said, if you Americans don't shut down the Israelis, you are going to burn. This fire is going to burn you. So the Americans are being threatened by the Iranians to shut it down, to shut the Israelis down, or more Americans will be hurt and die. So with that picture in mind, what is Biden doing? He's coming to the Israelis and saying, shut it down. That looks to me like appeasement of Iran.
That is indeed ominous. Let's move to other ominous things. American Jewry. I spoke earlier to our friend Liel Leibovitz at Tablet in the aftermath of the murder of Paul Kessler, a demonstrator for Israel, a Jew in LA, and the fact that Jews are once again killed for supporting Israel somewhere in the world, somewhere in the West, in America of all places, is a chilling thought. So I asked Liel, what does this mean for the future of American Jewry? Hello, Liel.
Shalom to you, God.
Paul Kessler was murdered in LA for the simple fact of being a Jew and supporting Israel. Has it become dangerous to be a Jew in the United States?
Sadly, it has. And you could learn of just how dangerous it's become that major media outlets are still refusing to admit that Paul Kessler was murdered for being a Jew. There is tremendous equivocation when this particular story is reported. People are saying, well, you know, he had an altercation and then he fell. And then, hey, look, there's a really nice Palestinian woman who's here to try to help him off the ground. It's a completely ridiculous and shameful way to tell the story, and just another indication of why Jewish suffering is still not accepted in American mainstream today.
But 7,000 people, 7,000 is it, marching on the Brooklyn Bridge shouting Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. Is that not a wake-up call for the media, for the Jewish community?
I think those are two very different things. Is it a wake-up call for the media? No, I think the media, like American universities, like so much of American corporations, like so much of American cultural institutions, are completely gone. They are so deeply corrupted by this anti-Semitic mind virus that there's absolutely no way out. The American Jewish community is a very different story. I think a lot of American Jews are waking up, especially since October 7th, and realizing, to quote my friend Brett Stevens, who their friends aren't, realizing that a lot of organizations, especially progressive organizations that they thought were, to use the common parlance of the day, their allies, actually are actively cheering on their destruction. And this is not just a rude awakening. It is actually an existential crisis, because so many American Jews, especially those, born long after Israel was a fait accompli, a secure and thriving nation, really based their entire identity on being good, progressive liberals who support the Democrat Party. To figure out that everything you thought you knew, not just about America, but about yourself was a lie, that's a really big lift.
Let's speak about the, I'd say, takeover of the ADL by the Obama people, by Jason Greenblatt. What has that meant?
That has meant everything. It is both indicative of what has happened to so much of organized American Jewry, and also tragic in its own right. The ADL, for more than 100 years, has been this wonderful, indispensable organization that both accurately reported anti-Semitic attacks and also advocated for the safety and well-being of ordinary Jews all over the country.
I said Jason Greenblatt. I should have said Jonathan Greenblatt. I'm sorry. Confused two very different people. Yeah, sorry.
Fine person. Jonathan Greenblatt is a former Obama White House aide who took over the organization with a very simple understanding that if you played the game of DEI and identity politics and victimhood, if you basically held the Jewish card in this swamp of grievances and victimhood, you could turn this into big bucks, because now all of a sudden you could teach corporate seminars, you could have all kinds of really lucrative operations with big corporations like Apple, for example. And Jonathan Greenblatt saw this opportunity and took it. The price that all of us paid is that the organization transformed itself very rapidly from actually standing for and with Jews to standing for and with whatever the Democrat Party saw as the worthy agenda. So that is why the ADL has been telling us for years now that even though the BLM movement, Black Lives Matter movement, has been decidedly willfully and clearly not just anti-Zionist, but deeply and purposefully anti-Semitic, we should stand with them because we should be good allies and we should be part of the same progressive coalition. They have been telling us that even though DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, has led to horrific results for people who identify as traditional Jews and who hold traditional Jewish worldviews, we should embrace this because this is what progress looks like. These were destructive lies because a lot of, nice, innocent Jews all over America thought to themselves, hey, if the ADL says I should support BLM, it must be true. We're waking up.
So Jews supported BLM, then discovered that BLM has a very strong anti-Semitic element, if not the whole of it. And then they said, okay, they're not anti-Semitic, they're anti-Zionist. And so many Jews, the conclusion of many Jews was, okay, we'll be anti-Zionist too, because Zionism is colonialism and all the rest of the post-colonial stuff that they learned in university, in college. But now it turns out that some of these people are just supporting Hamas. So the Jews who became post-colonial liberals, are they now sitting in Staten Island and singing "Never Again" for everyone? Or are they now waking up to see that this is dangerous stuff?
I think a lot of people are waking up. Hamas famously does not bother asking you, I'm sorry, before I behead your baby, is the baby anti-Zionist or is the baby merely, post-colonialist? I think the savagery of these attacks, the fact that they were documented, the fact that they were celebrated so widely by so many people who really weren't even bothering to pretend that they're pro-Palestine anymore. They were just straight out pro-Hamas. Coming up with signs that say we support our martyrs, waving the green Hamas flag. You see this on college campuses, Gadi, like these days in America. I think that was really shocking to people who realized, and look, some people might have been, I think many people might have been really innocent. Some people might have been operating in really good conscience, trying to do something to really kind of be good people, be good Democrats, be good liberals, be good neighbors, be good friends. And they're realizing now that this goodwill is not only not reciprocated, but is met with genocidal glee.
Liel Leibovitz, thank you for making the time for us.
Baruch Hashem.
all across the West in university, we see the fruits of 40 years of post-colonial studies on the under the influence of Edward Said, and the consequences are horrible. At Yale, there was an anti-Israeli event, which was Judenrein. They didn't let the Jewish students in. But in Israeli academia, this is playing strangely, because we were all shocked by Hamas and so suddenly woken up. And still, these are progressive institutions, and you see them blindly striking at both sides. So it's actually, if it hadn't been so serious, it would have been funny. There was in Haifa University, there was a student who openly supported Hamas.
I'm sorry, I laugh because the minute we start talking about academia, I laugh because I think they're clowns.
Yeah, you'll judge at the end of this story. I don't think you'll have any ground for revising your view. I'll say that. So the dean, the rector, which is the provost in English, at Haifa University, said that this student would be suspended. Then, like Pavlovian dogs, 25 faculty members rose up and said that's illegal and shouldn't be done, and this is discrimination, and the student shouldn't be suspended. It's an Arab student. And then 10,000 students signed a petition against the professors who tried to defend the student that was kicked out. And the provost stood on the side of the 10,000 students and reprimanded the faculty who signed this letter. Then there was Tel Aviv. In Tel Aviv, Professor Ariel Porat, the president of the university, wrote an email to all the faculty in which he reprimanded a faculty member who wrote a piece in a newspaper saying Gaza should be demolished. And then some students complained to the dean saying that he shouldn't ban such opinions, which are, the student said, very relevant and express the feeling and was morally right, they said. And so the president wanted to meet the students who protested, and right after the meeting, he was seen speaking at a public event in which he quoted the Bible. And so I looked for one of the English translations of the Bible, and I'll read you, Mike. I want a double screen for this because I want to see your face while I read this. You remember what the Amalekites did to you along the way when you came out of Egypt. When you were weary and worn out, they met you on your journey and attacked all who were lagging behind. They had no fear of God. Therefore, when the Lord your God has given you rest from all your enemies around you in the land that the Lord your God is giving to you for inheritance and possession, you shall blot out the memory of the Amalekites from under the heaven. You shall not forget. So it started with a professor who demanded the razing to the ground of Gaza, and it ended with destroying the Amalekites. I don't think that under any circumstances before October 7, I would imagine a president of an Israeli university demanding to erase the Amalekites from under the sun. And any notes before we conclude on academia, Mike?
No, all I want to tell you is that I want to have a discussion with you later in a later episode about how Israelis should define victory, because all these emotional outbursts, I understand them. They're part of the picture, but we have to have a clear head, and I want to talk about that.
Yes, indeed. But remember that these emotions are also highly relevant. So while they shouldn't be taken for literally, they also have to be factored in, because remember that a government of Israel that would now be appeasing or too submissive to the Americans will also lose power.
No, I don't disagree with you about that. But I want to use our heads too. By the way, when I'm into the Eisenhower administration, and which was pressured Israel when it was trying to stand up to Egypt in 1955, 1956. And at that time, John Foster Dulles, who was no great friend of Israel, famous Secretary of State, arrived in Israel, and right-wing protesters met his plane, and they said, Dulles, Amalek, mi artseno tistalek.
So translate this for our English viewers.
Dulles, you're an Amalekite. Get the hell out of our country.
And
But it rhymes. It rhymes.
it rhymes in Hebrew
If
beautifully.
you say it,
So-
it'll rhyme better than when I say it.
So why don't we also finish with Churchill's rhyme, who said, "Dull, duller, dullus." He was speaking of John Foster Dulles. And on that,
Churchill, sorry, one more. Churchill also said about Dulles that he's the only bull who carries around his own china shop.
you have another quote, the one about just smart enough. Let's finish with that.
Oh yeah. I steal that all the time. I use it in other contexts. That Dulles was just smart enough to be stupid on a grand scale.
Indeed, he was. Thanks for being with us on this episode. And now, Mike, I'll be precise. We'll be here again. Is it next week, or should we say this week, because it's Sunday?
It's
at
the
end of and on the weekend.
Who are we talking to? Are we talking to Christians or Jews?
We're talking to Americans.
Americans. Americans. It's next Sunday. No, it's this week. Next Sunday. Oh
we'll
hell,
see.
I don't know. I am. You confused me now.
You
wanna know a
are
little-
too much
little-
immersed in Israeli matters, Mike.
Little known fact. Do you know that you can go to Sunday Mass as a Catholic on Saturday night?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you can. You know why?
Why?
Because the Catholic Church follows the Jews in terms of deciding that
The eve. The
Yes.
eve is already the day.
Yes,
wow.
but they don't like to advertise it.
And on
But it's
this
true.
relatively
But it's
happy note, we'll see you on the weekend, apparently. Thanks for watching.
Bye.